Tom Downey. I'm coming for you. Welcome to the GridTalk podcast. My name is Tom Horrox, and today we are here to preview the Formula One MSC Cruises Gran Premiero del Made in Italy del Emilia Romagna 2024 Grand Prix, otherwise known as Imola. Joining me today, we have GridTalk's Owain Medford.
Hello.
And Grip Strip podcast, Philip Mathew.
Hello.
Great. And before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor, Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all our summer sports this season for MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow for your favourite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every other sport out there. Head to the website today to use your mobile device to get in touch with the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. And also, please be sure to follow us on our social channels at GridTalk to stay up to date with the show. So we're going to jump straight into Imola this year, and we're going to start with you, Phil. So this is the fourth time we've been back at Imola in the modern era. Race was heavily rained off last year. Hopefully things have returned to normal in the town now. How good is it to have it back on the calendar? And should we be savouring this time with this classic European circuit, or is it the constant replacement rumours, are they going to come to fruition?
I mean, it all depends. I think for Ferrari's sake, having two Italian races is a good thing, but they had that for many years, and I don't really know what the drive was. And, we're 30 years on from Senna and Ratzenberger this year. That was last week, and the track, once that took place, they changed it, and basically took away a lot of the character that the track had, which was basically a very fast place, and you had to be very committed. Then they just put a bunch of chicanes in there. Now it's a bunch of chicanes, a couple of straights, and that's about it. There's really no challenge to the circuit, and it's a DRS train waiting to happen. That's basically what Imola is for Formula One. I'll say that on the World Endurance Championship side, they were able to put on a decent race. But to be completely honest, the World Endurance Championship is a more competitive championship too. So do we really need Imola? Should it be replaced? The point is they want to do business with all the Middle Eastern countries anyways. So between that and looking at making street courses in whatever, Milan or wherever they want to make a street course, all those different things they could come up with. I mean, if they got rid of Imola, it wouldn't bother me. I mean, if they're going to go there, they're going to go there. It's better to have more European rounds than be going to dictator countries. But I can personally take it or leave it when it comes to this circuit, because I really don't see what the fascination is with it anymore. I could see what the fascination was back in the day when it was in its more original form.
No, I agree with a lot of what you say about the track. I do think we have had some reasonable races there in the time it's come back, but I agree. If you tell me what's the point in having two Italian Grand Prix, probably not really fair given what they bring to Formula One in that sense. And if you're going to pick one to stay, it's always Monza for me. So I've nothing against Imola, same as you. I think it does bring us some good races, but yeah, potentially not the one to save if you have the choice. But for new F1 fans, Owain, what can they expect from Imola this weekend in the way of track battles? And what's been your favourite moment since Imola has come back? There's been a few.
Yeah, so Imola as a circuit, if you're new to Formula One, you'll notice that it's how I would describe it is it's very much an old school circuit, and by old school I mean I don't even mean sort of in the similar vein as Silverstone or Monza or Spa, although Spa is closer to it. It's fast. It's got very few corners, and the corners that it does have now in a modern F1 car taken very, very at very high speed. You'll notice that the walls are very, very close to the track surface. They've taken some of the speed out with it with some of the chicanes that were put in following Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger's tragic accidents nearly 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, sorry. But even now, it's still a very quick circuit, and more recently they've taken a chicane out of the main straight, so it's now a very long, very fast straight, and leading into the braking zone at turn one. That's probably your biggest overtaking spot. Maybe Tosa as well if you manage to follow through the first sector, which is the hairpin before you sort of come along the other part of the circuit, rise up the hill and down again, and then make your way back to the finish line. My favourite sort of moment is it's kind of in and of itself, it's not a big moment. I think it was indicative of things to come, really. It's actually in 2021, it was the point where Max and Lewis were going into the into the first corner neck and neck. I mean, every other memory I have of Imola since his return is based off crashes, unfortunately. So I won't be going with that. I'd rather actually go with, just sort of, a very, very harsh move from Max Verstappen that got him in front, and it really set the tone for the year to come. And I think it sort of, like I say, it set the tone for the years to come, and it's kind of the thing that sort of solidified Imola as one of those still legendary tracks. It's difficult. I mean, one thing I will say is that, as much as I say it's that the barriers are close, one thing you might notice if you're a returning Formula One fan is that the gravel traps on the outside of a number of the corners, particularly Acqua Minerale, which is the fast right-hander up, fast right-left up the hill, and then Variante Alta, which is the top of the top chicane. They will have gravel on the outside, so you won't be able to escape through the runoff areas like you would have been last year.
That's a lot of great info there. Thanks a lot for that. And yeah, that moment is one that definitely stands out for me, and I think that definitely set the tone for the season. Like you say, that was the moment that Lewis knew that he could not back out anymore. He'd always in the past backed out of battles with Max Verstappen. At that point, he knew he could no longer do it. I think without that race, we don't necessarily have Silverstone and Monza incidents the way that they did happen. That was, you say, the lighting of the touch paper. And other moments, you say, you alluded to some spectacular moments, including crashes. Two of those moments at Imola did involve George Russell writing off his Mercedes chassis. So coming to you, Phil, for Mercedes, they really seem to be on the back foot this year. Potentially, they seem to be getting further away every year, and it seems to be a bit listless, a bit a ship that just can't turn around. Can you see this trend continuing this weekend?
Yeah, I don't, because of the way that the circuit is with low downforce and very small wings, that's become a weakness for this car, for this team. You look at what they've brought to the table more or less most of the time, and it's not, there isn't much to show that they're going to be able to stand up to that on a higher downforce or medium to higher downforce circuit, which, I mean, I guess we could say that Miami is probably middle of the road. That one, you had Lewis making some really tough overtakes and was able to get a top 6 finish out of it, but that's few and far between. He's been struggling to be in the top 10. Russell, the same thing. He might out-qualify Lewis, but generally speaking in the race, Lewis has been, at least in recent races, has been a little bit. I mean, at this point, it doesn't really matter with them because they don't know what they want from this season. Their car isn't very good. There isn't very many signs that it's going to get better. At times, they're the 5th best car when Fred Alonso decides to show up. So it's like you're the 5th best car. You can't qualify well. You don't have race pace. You're getting blown past by midfield cars. I mean, I don't know what Toto Wolff, I know he likes to get angry and smack desks and stuff and whatever, and they've lost a lot of good people over the years, but at some point you have to respond to the reality of the world, and that since 2020 you have not made a good race car, and it could be even longer if you really want to get into it. The fact is now you're not going to have Lewis Hamilton who's willing to go and sacrifice himself for the betterment of the team. You have George Russell, who's not a car developer, and you're going to bring in a raw rookie who has no real clue. He just has a lot of speed. So or you're going to sign someone for 1 year like Carlos Sainz or something. So, I mean, it's not going to change this weekend. It really isn't going to change. They would need like the McLaren miracle that happened at Silverstone last year. We all go back to that, where they went from being absolute, bottom of the barrel to right on pace. And then for the second half of the year, they were arguably the second best team, and they were the best team amongst everybody else. And now with Lando winning, I think it's a battle between them and Ferrari. Mercedes is well behind that. And to me, that for the amount of money they put into this sport and how much money they have in they're bringing to the table, I think that's pretty bad to have such a bad product that the last 3 years that they've put on the racetrack.
Yeah, it's been disappointing. I know we've only had one race here with this generation of car with what happened last year, but best result was 4th place for Russell, and Hamilton was lapped a long way back in that race. So It's not been a happy hunting ground since the aero regulations changed. Obviously, Lewis won in 2020, and I think he finished behind Max Verstappen in second in 21, but obviously a very competitive car. So up until then, it seemed to work well at Imola, but not so much since they changed the aero. But a team that are doing a lot better than Mercedes at the moment, nearly double the points of Mercedes, are their customer McLaren, flying high. Owain Norris got his breakthrough win in Miami. Can you see the first back-to-back McLaren win for 12 years this weekend? We live in hope.
I don't want to say no. I think Lando Norris actually goes very well around Imola. We saw that in, I believe it was 2020, where if not for millimeters really for Lando Norris taking the car out, I think it's Piratella outside the white lines, he got his lap time deleted, and therefore other than that he was looking like he was on for pole. He was on a very, very quick lap. Obviously a completely different generation of car, but
him so since then.
Yeah, exactly. And one of them being a win at Miami, which is a again, I'm going to get this, I said this before, or at least a similar statement, but I actually don't think Miami is dissimilar in some ways to Imola. I think the differences mainly come in the fact that, and there's a lot more elevation change obviously at Imola, and Imola is probably a faster circuit through the corners, but that seems to suit the McLaren, to be quite honest. And we'll be looking at them having a full upgrade package on both cars, and I think that really sort of stunted Piastri a little bit, and obviously Norris was able, therefore, with that car to challenge the Red Bulls. Now I do think it was a weakened Red Bull. We heard them having balance problems all through the weekend, particularly Verstappen we heard most about. Maybe I think Perez, I guess, could deal with it maybe more, or I'll be honest with you, he's less relevant, so we didn't hear it as much. But yeah, I think that we were in the scenario with the Red Bull where they were having a bad weekend, and particularly after they got that damage, obviously Red Bull was, Max was unable to catch back up. But I think this is, that's exacerbated something which is still true at its heart, which is that the McLaren with this upgrade is fast. And I think, given the right circumstances, they actually can challenge the Red Bull. That it's a track that they know fairly well. The temperature will be different, so that may, there's this sort of skews things again, unless they have a big heat wave or something like that. But yeah, not having looked at the weather, but I don't think it's going to be as hot as Miami. It's just completely different in a latitude sense. So I think there's a chance of it, but I don't think we're going to get back to back. I still think they're going to do well though.
Definitely a 5-star performance needed from both McLaren boys this weekend. And speaking of 5 stars, if you've enjoyed this podcast, we'd love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate when those come in, and they really help us climb up the charts and help us get heard. So please do that. If you haven't yet subscribed to us, please consider doing so. Give us a like and subscribe, and then obviously you can then catch our shows when they go out live. But at the time of recording, we had no news on any potential for any Andrea Kimi Antonelli replacing Logan Sargent was the rumour going around the paddock in Miami, Phil. And Ken Sargent, is he likely to remain in his seat for the remainder of the season? Or are we getting a bit overhyped about this Antonelli nonsense? The kid sits 9th in F2 after all, or am I just being a bit uneducated on F2?
No, well, we need the Formula Talk crew to go and give us that real answer. But in reality, there hasn't been a lot from what I've seen on highlights that makes me say that he's the next big thing. Is Logan going to make it through the season? I have a hard time believing that. When that's going to happen, who knows? I feel like middle of the year, there's a couple of places that they could do it. If they weren't going to do it for this weekend and starting now, then they're going to wait till after Monaco, because it doesn't make any sense to go and get rid of him for Monaco, even though he may not do very well, whatever. You do it at Silverstone, or you do it after you finish, when you get into the summer, after the summer break. Those are a couple places where I think it would happen. For Logan, the car's terrible. They're not a good team this year. Last year, there was an excuse, like it was his first year. He's very raw. He's someone that in his second year shows a lot of talent, or shows a lot of progression. Well, this year he hasn't been able to show it because, one, they took him out of his car when Alex Albon decided to write one off, and then they've never recovered. I mean, they haven't recovered since everyone figured out they were using Excel. So the notion that we're sitting here at this point in May and they're basically with Alpha, Kick, Start, Sauber, or whatever in the bottom, it's not surprising. And they've taken such a step backwards. I don't know. It seems like they're going back to where they were when they had George Russell, when they were the worst team on the grid by far, which, is bad. But, I mean, if Antonelli's coming in, sure, whatever. I don't think anything different. I mean, he may keep the car clean, but he's not going to bring anything to the table. They're not going to be scoring points, and that doesn't matter who you put in the car. Alex Albon's not scoring points with that car. They're barely making Q2. So they can make whatever changes they want, and it really isn't going to make a difference. They have big problems, and I don't know what their hope is for 26, but they're still a customer team, and I don't know how they're going to go and make this huge leap from where they are right now when they have the resources that they have. So we'll see what happens, but even if they get rid of Logan Sargent, which they probably will, I don't see there being much difference in the results or the bottom line for them.
No, but if you said to them at the start of the season, they'd be sitting just 1 point behind Alpine, you think, well, maybe it's going to be a good season for them, but I think that's a gross indictment on Alpine as a team. We're not really going to be talking about Alpine today, but one team that we will be talking about, Owain, is Ferrari. They were expected to be very close to Red Bull last time out, but it wasn't to be. There will be no checking with the announcement of, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but Javier Marcos Pedros will not be race engineering Leclerc anymore. Why do you think that is? Has anything happened, or is that just a change in position? And how do you rate Ferrari's chances this weekend?
So, I mean, I've had a look, and apparently it's a bit of a reshuffle, and it's a, sort of, I guess the reshuffling, of Xabi Marcos going somewhere else with it. He's not leaving, but he's transitioning to it. He's stepping up, basically. It's a promotion, is essentially what's happening, to a role focusing apparently on broader developmental programs within Ferrari, which is, it doesn't say whether that's within the F1 team itself or, sort of a Hamilton-based change, I guess, would be the way to say it.
The Mike Elliott promotion.
Yes, yeah. I mean, obviously that hasn't come from the fact that, he's been promoted up into it and not been particularly good. I mean, he's been doing a fairly good job, although as much as that has been meme-worthy, I think the we are checking thing is just how that team seems to operate. We've got various different nationalities within Ferrari. You've got a Monegasque whose primary language is going to be French. You've got Carlos Sainz who is Spanish, and then obviously the main backbone of the team is supposed to be Italian. I think that's a way of them removing all doubt and making sure they make that as correct calls as they can. Given those language barriers, it does seem that it's not. It doesn't seem that it's a particularly acrimonious sort of promotion, or it's not like he's been promoted out of harm's way or anything like that. But I guess it seems to be a reshuffle that's happening at Ferrari, and I don't really know why. And beyond that, when it comes to Ferrari's chances for this weekend, I think it's important to note that Ferrari used one of their filming days, but it might be the second, I'm not sure. But either way, they used their 100-kilometre filming day, one of them, to test, apparently, the new upgrade package that's coming. And I think it's a statement of intent, really, from Ferrari. It says to me that they really want to hit the ground running, and that makes sense. It's the first Italian race of the season, as we've mentioned. They do have two, and it's, after a disappointing week in Miami, maybe they've made that decision so they can, given their knowledge of Imola, given their knowledge of Fiorano, which, both are obviously fairly well known to them, and they can use Imola for testing for other things, so they will have data. And I wouldn't be surprised, when we were talking about before the show, how the hypercar program over at Ferrari was used apparently to move across engineers from the cost cap. So that is a positive. They managed to inherit engineers without losing them somewhere else. But that means that there is data within Ferrari that is up to date for Imola. In fact, if they use if they use the most up to date data, it's probably only a couple of months old. And maybe I think possibly they could be using that to try and hit the ground running as hard as they can, knowing that they can correlate some things that they find out of Fiorano about the new upgrade package compared to what they find out, to what they know about how Imola is as a circuit. And, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think their chances are good. I think I'm not going that off sort of based off historic car performance, but I'll say that, Ferrari, when it comes to their home races, does really tend to throw the kitchen sink at things. And I think that makes a difference. Plus you'll have the passion, obviously. I mean, it's a cliche, but will have that passion of their team, wanting to put on the best show possible for their tifosi.
Yeah, I'm going to use this opportunity to air a grievance of mine. You mentioned there about they use their filming day to test some parts. So there's not a filming day, it's a testing session then. Just call a spade a spade. We've got a cost cap in place. Don't do testing under cloak and dagger. Just do a test. Just do a 500-kilometre test or whatever you want to do. Comes out your cost cap. It means you haven't got a spare front wing for the next race. Just don't do this whole, we're going to test it during a filming day, because it's not a filming day. That's just one of my grievances. So apologies for that. I will move on to something slightly more relevant. We can't go through the entire podcast, Phil, without talking about Red Bull, although some of us would like us to. Will Max Verstappen be returning to his dominant form here? He won here the last 2 times we've come. So was that just a one-off in Miami, or is it going to be business as usual?
I mean, he's had a couple of these one-offs so far this year where he had the issue at Australia and then this deal at Miami. And frankly, those were the 2 best Grand Prix of the year. Well, the only 2 watchable ones. He'll get back to his usual stuff. So they're trying to build up for Monaco. They want him to win Monaco by like a lap. So they're going to build up for all that. This stretch of races, I think they want to be in good momentum since they're close to home, relatively speaking. So, yeah, they'll go back to doing their usual thing. Though I will say that both Ferrari and McLaren will make them work harder for it, which is nice. But once it gets down to it, we know that he'll go and win because that's just what he does.
Short and sweet. Love it. So before we move on to predictions, I'm going to ask you, Owain, for a certain prediction, which is involving Red Bull. So the Newey curse continues with Red Bull not winning in every race that Newey's attended since he announced his departure. So a grand total of 1 so far. Do you see the Adrian Newey? How do you see the Adrian Newey saga ending? Will it be sailing off into the sunset? Will he be catching a flight to Italy or catching an Uber to Brackley or Silverstone?
He could disappoint. Well, I say disappoint. He could disappoint some people. Well, he's taken a leaf out of Max Verstappen's book and used a simulator at home to prepare for the Monaco Grand Prix Historique, where he finished 4th in a Lotus 49B apparently this weekend. And apparently he's, according to Max Verstappen, he's focusing on his boat. So he could just leave. He could decide to go somewhere else and just and do something else. I mean, at this point, what more does he have to prove unless he can become the legend of legends by going to Ferrari? I'm not necessarily sure. He's turned down multiple contracts from them in the past, $20 million a year apparently. And on the sort of the subject of money, I don't think it entirely comes down to it. If he's turned down that kind of money and supposedly he doesn't really want to move to Italy, that's my understanding of it. That's widely reported. So, take it with a big pinch of salt. But, I think there's a certain amount of maybe that he might just not go anywhere. He might just say that, well, I've completed it all with everyone. I've taken existing teams to championships twice. I've taken a new team to, well, not just a new team, but uncompetitive team up to the tippy top multiple times. That's twice on the bounce. And maybe he doesn't want to be around for the engine change that supposedly he's known to dislike. I mean, that's why he stepped away from Red Bull, Red Bull's sort of main design role in 2014 when it was very clear that Renault didn't have an engine. So he knew that he wasn't going to get anywhere near the front unless he goes somewhere else. I mean, it's going to come down to who's got the most money if he does go anywhere, I think. And as much as I say that, he's not going to go and learn Italian, we would have said that about Lewis Hamilton a few years ago. So maybe the timing is right. And he's just sort of thinking, the last dance. But then again, I think he could go somewhere else. I mean, I think his options are open, but if he's going to go anywhere, it might well be Mercedes.
I don't think there's a team on the grid that would turn him down, and I'm definitely certain Red Bull would opt to keep him given the choice. Well, that is your preview for I'm not going to say the full title again, the this weekend's Grand Prix at Imola. So we're just going to do some predictions now. So, Phil, a pole position, winner, and a bold position just for funsies.
Verstappen, bold prediction is Alpine. One of the Alpines will just go with Pierre Gasly. Will finish in the top 6.
Nice. Okay. And Owain?
You know what? I'm going to go with pole going to Piastri. That's what I'm going with. I mean, I'm really sort of like leaning into your back-to-back wins for the first time in however many years it was. It was a lot. I promised I listened. Yeah, and then with the win, I'll be honest with you, I think Max Verstappen is still going to get it. I don't think there's any way that I see him not getting it. And then when it comes to the bold prediction, I'm going to go for, a Ferrari 1-2 to finish the race. That's what I'm going with.
Okay, so just to level off then, Tom's partisan predictions. As there's only 2 of us, I'm going to throw mine in there as well. I'm going to go for a Lando Norris pole position because he's very good at qualifying here. A Lando Norris win because you can't overtake in Imola. And the bold prediction is the first McLaren back-to-back race win with the same driver since Turkey and Canada in 2010, with Piastri grinding up a 1-2 finish. So there's my incredibly unbiased predictions for this weekend. To give you guys an opportunity to plug whatever you want to plug now. Phil, you've already plugged Formula Talk for us, but I'll let you plug the Grip Strip podcast now.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. The Grip Strip podcast, we talk about all things motorsports. Basically, if it goes fast, we talk about it on the Grip Strip podcast. Talk about Formula One. We also talk about IndyCar, NASCAR. This week, we'll be talking about World Endurance Championship at a very active Spa 6 Hours, which saw the Ganassi Cadillacs crash yet again, and a privateer with a guy who used to be a Formula One prospect winning overall. We'll also talk about the other series going on and leading up into Indianapolis 500 practice and qualifying this coming week. So myself and Josh Fine, we host a show. We've been doing it for over 200 episodes. You can find us on all the socials. You can find us at Gripstrip Pod on Twitter X. You can find us on YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can hear the Gripstrip podcast. So, that's it for me. Thanks for hosting, Tom, and great always to work with you, Owain. Love being on the show. So always great to be on the GridTalk.
And we love having you as well. Thanks a lot for coming along. And Owain, what would you like to plug?
Yeah, I'd like to plug the idea of keeping up to date with the show. So if you'd like to keep up to date with everything going on when it comes to GridTalk, make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms. That's at GridTalk UK on all of the social media platforms using the @
Taking away my closing speech there. But we are available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Does that exist anymore, Google Podcasts? I think it's shut down, isn't it?
Yeah, it's shutting down.
Shutting down. So it's still relevant for the moment. Apple Music, obviously, Verbal and Pocket Cast. Just search for Formula One and Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews, reactions, and qualifying and race results. We've also got some fireside chats on there as well. Lots of interviews, loads of stuff as well. And please consider supporting our channel on Patreon so we can get better mics, lights, and recording equipment. And make sure you subscribe to us and be the first to know when we are going live. We'll be back soon with plenty more content from this weekend's Grand Prix in Imola. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you once again to my panelists, and we will see you next time.